golden chains. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Malhotra penthouse, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Prisha Malhotra sat at her dressing table, fingers tracing the worn edges of an old sketchbook while her other hand absently twisted the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "Are you still keeping that old thing?" Arjun's voice came from behind her, sharp and dismissive. He adjusted his custom Italian suit in the mirror, barely glancing at his wife. "It looks like something from a garbage heap." Prisha gently closed the sketchbook, slipping it into her drawer. "My grandmother gave it to me when I was 14, Arjun. It has my first real drawings in it." Arjun sighed dramatically. "Well, thankfully you don't need to draw anymore. Being Mrs. Malhotra is a full-time occupation." He smiled at his reflection, pleased with himself. "The wives of the board members are expecting you at the charity luncheon today. Try to wear something impressive. Devika Chopra always comments on your outfits." Prisha nodded, reaching for her makeup brush. 5 years ago, she had been Prisha Sharma, a rising star in Mumbai's art scene. With 2 successful gallery showings and a prestigious art fellowship on the horizon, now she was primarily known as Arjun Malhotra's elegant wife, the perfect hostess who organized his corporate events and smiled graciously in photographs. After Arjun left for work, Prisha opened the drawer again and removed the sketchbook. Its pages were yellowed with age, the binding coming loose in places. Her grandmother, Nani, had saved for months to buy it, believing fiercely in her granddaughter's talent. "Art comes from here," Nani had told her, placing a weathered hand over Prisha's heart. "Not from fancy supplies." Prisha flipped through the pages, charcoal sketches of the Mumbai streets, watercolor studies of women at the market, detailed portraits of Nani's face with every line and wrinkle lovingly rendered. The final pages showed her evolution as an artist, the confident strokes that had earned her recognition before she met Arjun. She hadn't completed a serious piece in over 3 years. Glancing at her watch, Prisha hurried to dress for the luncheon. She selected a designer outfit that Arjun had approved, applied her makeup with practiced precision, and arranged her hair in an elegant updo. As she fastened her earrings, her phone chimed with a message from Divya, her only friend who remembered her as an artist first. 5 second. "Saw this and thought of you," the message read, followed by a link to an article about an upcoming exhibition featuring emerging Indian artists. For a moment, Prisha allowed herself to imagine submitting work, standing in a gallery again with people viewing her art, rather than assessing her outfit or her husband's status. The fantasy faded quickly. Arjun had made it clear that her little hobby wasn't befitting the wife of one of Mumbai's most prominent businessmen. She slipped her phone into her designer handbag, catching a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The woman who stared back was impeccably dressed, perfectly groomed, and completely unrecognizable from the passionate artist who had once worked through the night, hands stained with paint, heart full of purpose. The sketchbook went back in its drawer. Prisha locked it, tucked the key into a small velvet pouch, and headed out to perform her duties as Mrs. Arjun Malhotra, adorned in golden chains that grew heavier with each passing day. The gallery opening, the Dasgupta Gallery, glittered with Mumbai's elite on Friday evening. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the avant-garde paintings adorning the walls, as waiters circulated with champagne flutes balanced on silver trays. Prisha stood beside Arjun as he laughed boisterously with a group of investors, her smile fixed in place like another carefully selected accessory. "You remember my wife?" "Of course," Arjun said, placing a proprietary hand on Prisha's lower back. "She used to dabble in art herself before we married." "More than dabble, surely," said Nikhil Dasgupta, the gallery owner, with a knowing smile. "I remember your textile series from the Contemporary Arts Festival 5 years ago. Quite remarkable work." Prisha's cheeks warmed with both pleasure and embarrassment. "That's very kind of you to remember." Hardly dabbling when 3 pieces sold before opening night, Nikhil continued, ignoring Arjun's tightening expression. "Well, that was a lifetime ago," Arjun interjected smoothly. "Now she's far too busy with our foundation and social calendar." "Much more impactful work than making pretty pictures, wouldn't you say?" The conversation shifted to Arjun's recent business acquisition, and Prisha excused herself, drifting through the gallery alone. She stopped before a mixed media piece absorbing its bold colors and textures. When she felt the familiar weight of her small handbag shifting, she opened it to rearrange its contents and glimpsed her old sketchbook. which she'd impulsively tucked inside before leaving home. Mrs. Malhotra. A gallery assistant appeared at her elbow. Mr. Dasgupta has asked if you would join him in the private viewing room. There's someone he'd like you to meet. Prisha followed the assistant through the crowd, clutching her bag closer. The private viewing room was smaller, with select pieces displayed under perfect lighting. Nikhil stood chatting with a tall man whose back was to the door. "Ah, Prisha. Perfect timing," Nikhil called. "I want you to meet our featured artist this evening." The man turned around and Prisha felt her carefully constructed world tilt slightly on its axis. "Rohan?" she whispered. Rohan Varma's eyes widened in recognition, crinkling at the corners the same way they had when they'd shared studio space at art school. His simple black shirt contrasted with the ostentation around them, but he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged anywhere he chose to be. "Prisha Sharma," he said, using her maiden name with deliberate emphasis. "It's been too long." "It's Malhotra now," she corrected automatically, then immediately regretted it. "So I've heard." Rohan's smile remained warm, but something flickered in his eyes. "Your husband is quite the fixture in the business pages." Nikhil, sensing the undercurrent, excused himself to attend to other guests. "I didn't know you were back in India," Prisha said. "Last I heard you were working in Berlin, just returned last month, setting up a new studio in Bandra." Rohan glanced at her bag. "Is that what I think it is?" Before she could answer, Arjun's voice cut through their conversation. "There you are, darling. The Shahs are asking for you." He appeared at her side, eyes narrowing as he assessed Rohan. "Arjun Malhotra," he said, extending his hand with the confidence of someone used to being immediately recognized. "Rohan Varma." The handshake was brief. "Prisha and I were classmates at the institute." "Oh, another artist," Arjun said with false enthusiasm. "How persistent of you to stick with it." "Rohan is the featured artist tonight," Prisha explained, mortified. "His work has been exhibited internationally." Arjun's eyes performed a dismissive sweep of Rohan's understated attire. "How nice. Well, we must circulate. The minister is expected shortly." As Arjun guided her away, Prisha's bag slipped from her shoulder. The worn sketchbook tumbled out, landing open at Arjun's feet. He stared at it with undisguised contempt. "You brought this embarrassment here?" he hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "What were you thinking?" Prisha reached for the sketchbook, but Arjun snatched it first, snapping it shut. "This childish attachment to your past is becoming pathetic, Prisha. It's just paper and amateur scribblings." The gallery fell silent around them. Prisha felt heat rising to her face as she stood frozen, humiliation washing over her. Then Rohan stepped forward, his voice quiet but clear in the stillness. "May I see that sketchbook for a moment?" Arjun, suddenly aware of their audience, reluctantly handed it over. Rohan opened it carefully, his fingers tracing the lines of an old drawing. "This composition became Monsoon Memories, didn't it?" he asked Prisha. "The piece that won the National Young Artist Award." He turned to the gathering crowd. "Before some of you invested in her husband's companies, the art world was investing in her vision. This amateur scribbling launched one of the most promising careers I've witnessed." The room remained silent, but now with a different quality, intrigue rather than embarrassment. Arjun's face hardened into a mask of controlled anger, as Rohan gently returned the sketchbook to Prisha. "Some things," Rohan said, looking directly at her, "are valuable not because of what they cost, but because of what they're worth." Memories uncovered. The Malhotra penthouse felt unusually silent the morning after the gallery opening. Prisha sat on the balcony with a cup of tea gone cold, her grandmother's sketchbook open on her lap. Arjun had barely spoken during their ride home, his silence more punishing than any words could have been. He'd left early for a crisis meeting, though Prisha suspected he simply couldn't bear to look at her. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Coffee at Cafe Nostalgia?" "Like old times, Rohan." The cafe had been their sanctuary during art school, a tiny paint-splattered place where they'd sketch for hours over endless cups of masala chai. It had probably been replaced by some sleek international chain by now. "Still there," came another message, as if Rohan had read her thoughts. "Still terrible coffee?" Prisha hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. Meeting Rohan alone would infuriate Arjun. But something had awakened in her last night, a hunger she'd been denying for years. 2 hours later, she pushed open the door to Cafe Nostalgia, the familiar scent of spices and coffee enveloping her. The walls were still covered with artwork from local students, the mismatched furniture still arranged in cozy clusters. And there was Rohan sitting at their old corner table, sketching absently on a napkin. "You came," he said, looking up with a smile that transported her back 7 years. "I shouldn't have," she replied, but sat down anyway. A comfortable silence settled between them as the waiter brought their usual orders without being asked. The owner, Faisal, nodding in recognition from behind the counter. "So," Rohan finally said, "what happened to the Prisha who was going to redefine contemporary Indian art?" Prisha traced the rim of her cup. "She met Arjun. He was dazzling, confident. He talked about supporting my art, building me a studio, introducing me to international collectors." She gave a hollow laugh. After the wedding, it became clear he'd rather have a socialite wife than an artist one. The studio became a home gym. The introductions never materialized. "And you accepted that?" "Not at first." Prisha looked out the window. "I fought for a while. Then compromised, then surrendered, I suppose." Rohan reached across the table, touching the sketchbook she'd brought with her. "May I?" She nodded, and he began to turn the pages slowly, pausing at certain drawings. "Remember this day?" he asked, pointing to a sketch of students gathered around an elderly sculpture professor. "Professor Banerjee's last lecture before retirement," she said, smiling at the memory. "You convinced everyone to wear fake mustaches to match his. And this?" He turned to a detailed study of hands-working clay. "The pottery workshop in Dharavi." Prisha leaned closer. "You were terrible at it." "I was," he laughed. "But you made that incredible series afterward. Hands of creation, wasn't it?" The memories washed over her. Late nights in the studio, the exhilaration of solving an artistic problem, the camaraderie of fellow creators. Most of all, she remembered the feeling of purpose, of having something meaningful to say through her work. "The last exhibition I saw of yours was in Berlin," she admitted. "I followed your career online, while abandoning your own," he said, not unkindly. "I didn't think of it as abandoning, more like evolving into something else." Even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. Rohan turned to the final pages of the sketchbook, blank and waiting. "And what about now? What would these pages show if you filled them?" Prisha stared at the empty paper. "I wouldn't know where to begin anymore." "Begin with truth," he said simply. "It's all any artist can do." Their conversation shifted to Rohan's travels, his current projects, the changes in the art world. He spoke without pretension about his success, the same way he'd discussed student exhibits years ago. As afternoon lengthened into evening, Prisha realized she'd laughed more in these few hours than she had in months. "I should go," she finally said, reluctantly gathering her things. "Before you do." Rohan hesitated. "I'm curating a special exhibition next month. Resurgence is the theme. Artists returning to their voice after silence." He met her eyes directly. "I'd like you to contribute." Arjun would never allow it. "I'm not asking Arjun." The statement hung between them, a challenge and an invitation. Outside the cafe, as they prepared to go their separate ways, Rohan handed her a small package. "What's this?" she asked. "Just some basics. Charcoal, pencils, a few brushes." He shrugged, in case those blank pages start looking too empty. As she watched him walk away, Prisha felt something shift inside her, like a door, long locked, suddenly opening. She clutched the package to her chest, already imagining the feel of charcoal between her fingers, the freedom of making marks that were hers alone. For the first time in years, she felt the stirring of her own voice, waiting to be reclaimed. The exhibition for 2 weeks, Prisha lived a double life. By day, she was Mrs. Malhotra, attending luncheons, chairing charity committees, and maintaining the perfect facade that Arjun expected. But in the small hours of morning, while her husband slept, she would slip into the guest bedroom she had quietly converted into a makeshift studio. The supplies Rohan had given her quickly expanded. She ordered canvases delivered to Divya's apartment, then smuggled them home piece by piece. She set up a small easel by the window where moonlight provided just enough illumination to work without disturbing Arjun. With each stroke of charcoal and brush, memories of technique returned, muscle memory awakening after years of dormancy. Her first attempts were hesitant, awkward. But gradually something began to emerge from the chaos, a series taking shape that she titled Gilded Cages in her mind. Each piece depicted luxurious interiors with subtle, nearly hidden figures trying to break free. She worked feverishly, losing herself in the creative process she had abandoned for so long. "You've been distracted lately," Arjun remarked one evening as they prepared for bed. "The Sharma wedding is this weekend. I need you focused. The governor will be there." "Of course," Prisha replied automatically, hiding paint-stained fingernails in the folds of her robe. "And we need to discuss the charity gala next month. I'm thinking of inviting the finance minister." Prisha froze. "Next month?" "The 27th, why?" "The same night as Rohan's exhibition opening." She swallowed hard. "No reason. Just checking my calendar." As days passed, Prisha's work evolved. The images grew bolder, the metaphors less disguised. She was no longer painting just to create. She was painting to express everything she had suppressed for years. The sense of liberation was intoxicating. Meanwhile, texts from Rohan provided both guidance and encouragement. "How's it coming? Remember to trust your instincts. The space for your work is reserved. No pressure." But there was pressure, the weight of decision pressing down on her. Submitting to the exhibition meant openly defying Arjun, potentially risking her marriage and the life she'd grown accustomed to. Not submitting meant burying her voice again, perhaps permanently this time. 3 days before the deadline, Prisha made her choice. She carefully packaged her 3 finished canvases and took them to Divya's apartment. "Are you sure about this?" Divya asked, concern etched on her face. "No," Prisha admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." The next day, she helped Divya deliver the paintings to Rohan's studio. Seeing her work propped against the wall alongside pieces by established artists sent a thrill of terror and exhilaration through her. "These are remarkable," Rohan said quietly, examining each canvas. "You haven't lost your voice at all, it's just gained new depth." "What happens when Arjun sees them?" Divya voiced the question Prisha couldn't bring herself to ask. Rohan's expression softened. "That's not for me to say. But art has consequences, Prisha. It always has." The night of the exhibition arrived with a sudden torrential monsoon rain. Prisha stood in her closet, ostensibly preparing for Arjun's charity gala, when her phone buzzed with a message from Divya. "Gallery is packed. Your pieces are drawing crowds. Come if you can." Prisha stared at her reflection in the mirror, draped in an expensive sari, adorned with jewels that felt increasingly like shackles. On impulse, she changed into a simple kurta and jeans, clothing she hadn't worn in years. When she emerged, Arjun was waiting in the living room, already dressed in his tuxedo. "What are you wearing?" he demanded, confusion turning to anger. "The car will be here in 20 minutes. "I'm not going to the gala," Prisha said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "Don't be ridiculous." "Of course you are." "No, Arjun, I have an art exhibition tonight." His expression darkened. "Is this about that nothing artist from your past? Rohan, whatever his name is?" "This is about me," Prisha countered. "About my work being shown publicly for the first time in 5 years." "Work?" Arjun scoffed. "What work?" "Your little hobby drawings. 3 major pieces that I've been creating in secret because you've made it clear that my art embarrasses you." The words tumbled out now, unstoppable. "I used to be someone, Arjun. Before I was Mrs. Malhotra, I was Prisha Sharma, and people knew my name for what I created, not who I married." Thunder crashed outside, matching the storm brewing in their penthouse. Arjun's face contorted with anger and disbelief. "If you walk out that door," he warned, "don't expect to be welcomed back." Prisha hesitated only briefly. Then she picked up her raincoat and small clutch containing her grandmother's sketchbook. "I guess we'll both discover what matters most tonight," she said, and walked toward the door. "They'll forget about your art in a week," Arjun called after her. "But being a Malhotra, that's permanent." Prisha paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Nothing is permanent, Arjun. That's why each choice matters so much." As she stepped into the rainy night, phone already in hand to call a taxi to the gallery, Prisha felt lighter than she had in years, as if she'd set down a burden she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Canvas of dignity. The Ananya Gallery hummed with energy despite the pounding rain outside. Art critics mingled with collectors, students, and Mumbai's cultural elite, all drawn by the promise of Rohan Varma's curated Resurgence exhibition. Prisha hesitated at the entrance, rainwater dripping from her coat onto the polished floor. "You came." Divya appeared at her side, eyes wide with surprise and admiration. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," Prisha admitted, handing her wet coat to an attendant. "How bad is it? The reaction to my work?" Divya's face broke into a broad smile. "See for yourself." She led Prisha through the crowded gallery to a far wall where 3 canvases hung under perfect lighting. A small crowd had gathered before them, engaged in animated discussion. Prisha recognized art professors from her university days, critics whose opinions she'd once valued above all others, and several artists she had admired from afar. The symbolism of the golden cage gradually transforming into an open door in the triptych progression. One critic was saying, "Remarkable return to form for Sharma. The technical skill is evident, but it's the emotional honesty that elevates these pieces," commented another. Prisha stood frozen, listening to strangers dissect her most private emotions, analyzing the very journey she'd been too afraid to acknowledge even to herself. Her heart pounded in her ears, nearly drowning out the conversations around her. "The artist has arrived." Rohan's voice cut through the noise as he approached with a respected gallery owner from New York. "Prisha Sharma, allow me to introduce Eliza Montgomery. She's expressed particular interest in your work." For the next hour, Prisha found herself swept into a world she'd abandoned, discussing technique and inspiration, fielding questions about her artistic process, and accepting both praise and thoughtful critique with equal grace. With each conversation, she felt more of her authentic self returning, like color flowing back into a faded photograph. "These are already sold," Rohan informed her quietly when they had a moment alone, all 3 to separate collectors. "One's going to an international modern art museum." The news should have elated her, but Prisha felt a sudden pang. "I almost don't want to part with them," she confessed. "They feel too personal." "That's how you know they're good," he smiled. "When giving them up feels like surrendering a piece of yourself." The gallery doors opened again and a hush fell over the room. Arjun Malhotra stood in the entrance, still in his tuxedo, surveying the space with a businessman's calculating eye. When he spotted Prisha, he made his way directly to her, the crowd parting before him. Prisha straightened her spine, preparing for confrontation, but Arjun's eyes were fixed on the paintings. For several long moments, he said nothing, simply absorbing the images before him. The meticulous detail, the layered meanings, the undeniable skill. In the central canvas, a woman in golden chains reached toward a window where free birds soared against a limitless sky. "You did these?" he finally asked, his voice lower than usual. "Yes." "When?" "While you were sleeping. Or working late. Or at your club." Prisha maintained her composure, though her hands trembled slightly. "I found time." Arjun turned to face her fully. "They're selling, aren't they?" "I overheard someone mention prices." Of course that would be his first concern, the commercial value. "Yes, they've all sold." Something shifted in his expression, a recalculation. "We should discuss your studio needs when you get home." "Perhaps that space off the main living room, Arjun," Prisha interrupted gently. "I'm not coming home tonight." His confident smile faltered. "Don't be dramatic. We can work this out." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest, maybe for the first time in years." She gestured toward her paintings. "This is who I am. Not just your wife, not just a social accessory. I'm an artist who has something to say." "You can be both," he argued, lowering his voice as he became aware of curious onlookers. "I made a mistake, I see that now. We'll make adjustments." Prisha shook her head. "It's not about adjustments. It's about respect. You didn't just mock my sketchbook, Arjun. You mocked my essence, my history, my passion." She took a deep breath. "I need time to remember who I am without you defining me." Before he could respond, Eliza Montgomery approached with a contract in hand. "Ms. Sharma, when you have a moment, I'd like to discuss commissioning a new series for our winter exhibition in New York." The conversation pulled Prisha away, leaving Arjun standing alone before her paintings. Artwork that revealed more about his wife than he had bothered to learn in 5 years of marriage. Later that evening, as the exhibition wound down, Prisha found herself on the gallery's small balcony, Watching the rain wash the city clean, Rohan joined her, offering a cup of chai. "What happens tomorrow?" he asked, leaning against the railing beside her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've arranged to stay with Divya for a while. Beyond that..." She shrugged, but the gesture contained no defeat, only openness to possibility. "Your grandmother would be proud," Rohan said, nodding toward the worn sketchbook peeking from Prisha's bag. "Yes," she smiled, touching its cover gently. She always said art wasn't about the final piece, but about the courage to make the first mark on a blank page. Inside, someone called for Rohan. Before leaving, he hesitated. "For what it's worth, I always knew you'd find your way back to your art. Some voices can't be silenced forever." Alone again, Prisha opened her sketchbook to its remaining blank pages. With quiet determination, she began to draw the Mumbai skyline spread before her, rain-washed, glistening with lights, full of shadows and illumination in equal measure. Her strokes were confident now, unburdened by doubt or pretense. Whatever came next, reconciliation with Arjun on new terms or a completely different path, she would face it as herself. Not as someone's wife or someone's discovery or someone's disappointment, just as Prisha, an artist who had reclaimed her canvas, her voice, and her dignity. As she added final touches to her sketch, she realized the rain had stopped. Above the city, stars were beginning to appear one by one in a clearing sky.